All right, so off the top, first order of business, February 2nd, happy birthday, Dad. And that is why we are talking about The Professionals. I thought I had another Lucky in the cooler. I did not. My dad's been asking me to talk about this movie for a while, and sorry everybody, but my dad trumps y'all just a little bit. All right, so The Professionals came out in 1966, and it's kind of a Western. I mean, it is a Western, but it's set during a time period where there's cars. At least at the beginning of the movie, everybody kind of shows up in a car. That was a little weird because I'd seen this movie, but like years ago when I was younger, because my dad really likes this movie. He watches it about 18 times a month. That's still nothing compared to Spotlight. Anyway, for the sake of argument, it is a Western. It is a Western movie because the majority of the movie is about a little band of misfit heroes off on an adventure to rescue a damsel in distress in the dusty West. Well, it's more like the dusty South. And they're on their horses and going up against Mexicans. I mean, Western. If you haven't seen it, it's a setup I'm sure you've heard of a lot, although back then it probably wasn't as common. I say that, but there were plenty of movies that came before this that probably had a very similar setup. Four guys, four soldiers of fortune is what the synopsis says, are hired by this like oil baron rancher guy whose wife has been kidnapped by a Mexican outlaw, and he wants them to go and get her back. Mexican outlaw wants a ransom for her. He don't want to pay it. He's going to pay these four guys $10,000 each to go get her back. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money by today's standards. It's a fortune back then. All I get is soldiers of fortune. So this band of four, well, I wanted to say misfits, but they're really not. They're soldiers. They've been in conflicts. A lot of them have been in, I guess it would have been the Mexican Revolution, and they fought on the side of Mexico. And the guy who kidnapped the wife is a buddy of at least two of the main characters. So here's the thing. The story's focused on four guys who are going across the Mexican border to rescue this woman, right? But at the end of the day, it really is the Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster, sorry, Dad, show. And that's pretty evident like right off the hop. And I'm not too familiar with these actors. The other two, I think it was like Robert Ryan. I should have looked up their names. Because that's the point. I mean, maybe all four of these guys were huge names back in their heyday, but in the movie, it's just Burt Lancaster and Lee Marvin's characters that really get the time to shine. And it's not a knock against the movie per se, and it's really good in their favor because they both do very good jobs with these roles. Lee Marvin sort of plays the leader of the group, kind of, and he's the no-nonsense, just want to get the job done, I made a deal, my word's my word sort of guy. And he's also very clean for a cowboy. And then Burt Lancaster is the ladies' man. He's this suave one that's always getting caught with his pants off. But he also likes to blow shit up. He's like the dynamite guy. And then you, of course, got the other two. One's really good with a bow and arrow. The other guy, well, he really likes horses and he can make stew. That'll be relevant in a minute. The movie is entertaining. I did enjoy it watching it now in 2022 for a movie that was made in 1966. I thought they did a really good job. Back then, everything was practical, from the stunts to the effects and all of that. And there is this one... That would have been one of the cats falling onto the poo bucket. There's this one stunt during, I believe it's the climax or one of the final confrontations. There's a lot of fights in this movie where he gets shot from a distance. Burt Lancaster lines up and gets him. And the camera doesn't cut. This guy does the deaths are a little amusing. They kind of bang. Oh, more than once that happens. But in this particular shot, like I said, the camera doesn't cut and this guy falls off the mountain. I mean, that's what my brother does, I guess, but it looks so much more hardcore than anything we see these days with all the close-up stuff that we do or the shaky cam footage in modern films. This is just like, no, here's the picture and here's this guy. So all of that in this movie was great. Unfortunately, a lot of this movie feels padded out. It's almost 2 hours in runtime, and it does show. There were at least 2, possibly 3 scenes, very obvious they could have been cut down just a little bit. A lot of dialogue, a lot of backstory, a lot of banter about the good old days and the battles we've been in and what a woman means to me and what a woman means to you, and please don't shoot the horses. Seriously, that's all this one guy does. If they had shortened those scenes up a little bit, maybe made them a little bit more fast-paced, or removed them all together. Like, there's this one scene before the big rescue sequence where they don't really capture this Mexican guy, but they get him and he's part of the bad guy's posse. And there's this whole sequence where he has to prove that he's gonna help our heroes, because a bunch of the bad guy's henchmen show up and he goes out and has the talk with them, and he doesn't reveal the location of the professionals to these guys, and then they go about their merry way. But then when the scene's done, he just goes back to the bad guys, and it just felt like that scene specifically you could have removed from the movie completely. Nothing would have changed. That character was completely irrelevant except for one thing that comes up later on, and that might as well just talk about it now. So it's a Western adventure. The good old boys are going out there. The score in this movie is amazing. I understand I'm all over the place. I like Westerns, and this was one of the better ones. As good as something like Unforgiven, not in my opinion, but I did like it more so than like the Magnificent Seven remake. Like, that was a great movie, and the original was enjoyable as well. But this one, in my opinion, was better. Anyway, let's get back on track, shall we? The big rescue sequence where our heroes are gonna go get the lady out of the Mexican jail. It's not a jail, but let's not give away too much. You know, this movie came out in 1966. Wouldn't want to spoil anything. That sequence comes up, and only 3 of them go. The other guy, the guy who loves the horses and loves making stew, that's the only reason I can come up with for why he stays back. Unless I missed some very important piece of dialogue that included the reasoning why one of the 4 guys sent on this mission would just stay back at the train. I feel like they done messed up in the screenwriting process, because all that happens from that is it's just a setup for when they come back with the girl. Like, spoilers, they rescue the girl, they come back and he's there just to lead into the scene that the bad guys have surrounded them. I feel like you still probably could have had that happen, but also made the smart decision for all 4 of the guys that were hired to rescue the girl to go rescue the girl. It just felt very weird and obvious. Like I said, there are a lot of dialogue heavy scenes that move along at a snail's pace, so maybe they did say, oh, you got to stay back and make stew because we're all going to be hungry when we get back. I'm not just exaggerating this stew thing. When we get to that scene, the camera pans over this big like pot of stew over the fire, so in my head I'm like, well, he clearly just stayed back so everybody would have sustenance. One thing that I noticed as the movie went on that I really applauded for was its sort of subtle storytelling when it comes to the backstory of these guys. Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster's characters, they always call each other amigo, but they're white as white. They're not Mexican, but it speaks to the fact that they were part of the Mexican Revolution and fought on the Mexican side. I thought that was a great little subtle detail without hitting the audience over the head with it. Same thing happens when it comes to this woman character that Burt Lancaster meets. She's on the bad guy's side, and they have this gunfight at the climax of the movie after a whole bunch of talking, yes, where he ends up shooting her and she's dying in his arms. And the way they're talking, you're like, wait, was she just a bit of a promiscuous lady, or is there something going on here? And then by the end of the scene, you're like, oh shit, they were a thing. They had a romantic relationship at some point, and now the Wild West has brought these 2 to a climactic head where guns were drawn and blood was shed. It kind of speaks to how crazy things were, even if they weren't exactly like that in reality. In the universe that this movie has created, I thought that was really cool. It kept me guessing, because I was just like, wait a second, why is she saying that? And why is he saying this? Are these people just really horny? Or, oh no, look at that. So a lot of nice, subtle storytelling. I feel like today, if something like that was done, it would be smashed over our heads. Like in the briefing sequence, when the guys are all being told about their quest, her picture would have popped up on the commuter. It would have popped up on the computer monitor, and Burt Lancaster had been like, I know her. That's Maria. We have 3 children and 4 dogs, and she left me for Juarez, or something, right? Then so when we get to that point, we'd be like, oh, yeah, these 2 had a relationship. It was much better done here. The one thing the movie didn't really have which I think it earned and deserved to have, was a huge climactic gunfight between the four heroes and the bad guys. You get a great gunfight with exploding arrows and dynamite and all that stuff when the rescue's going down, but the final conflict is nothing. You can argue that before that, Burt Lancaster goes up against their buddy from the Revolution, sure, but again, it's dialogue heavy and the action is pretty low on the bar of expectations. And then when they get to the big revelation with the guy who hired them and all of that stuff, it's just, again, guns drawn, but nothing really fired. And it's just sort of, maybe it's just in my head that Westerns are supposed to have gunfights. And like I said, this movie does have them. But if ever a movie earned a really cool shootout, I feel like it was Professionals, and it just didn't get it. It ends up kind of feeling weird and empty by the end. They just give up everything. They're like, we don't need the money. We did the right thing. And they just ride off into the sunset. I mean, the argument can be made that that's good storytelling as well, because it was. I was engaged right up to the end. Just my thoughts on this movie. And again, I breezed over it before when I said the score, and then I said I'm all over the place. But yes, the music is that iconic Western Hollywoodized, just has that rise and just get your blood pump. I don't know what I'm saying, but it's really freaking good. It just kind of washes over and you're like, dun, 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 dun. I know that's Indiana Jones. Everybody just calm down. Big orchestra playing, and it comes in at the right moments just to make you feel like, yeah, I'm watching a Western. You don't even need to be looking at the screen. It's like, da, 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 da. All right. At the end of this, taking everything into account, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought worked, what I thought didn't work, The Professionals is, without a doubt, a 7.5 out of 10. If you like Westerns, you've probably already seen it. If for some reason you haven't, I say check it out. It's on Netflix. If you like movies from that era in Hollywood, you're gonna enjoy this. And if you're somebody who wants me to review Tombstone, well, you're gonna have to calm down, because I haven't found it yet. Happy birthday, Dad. So what about you guys? Have you seen The Professionals? Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Or if you have any other suggestions of movies that you would like me to consider for reviewing, we'll leave them down there, and I will see you all in the next one.